Hello, Loic.
Hi.
So today we're studying Uranus. It's in the second point of Gemini, and we're looking at the Elven Star of Uranus today, and we're going to try and study what that means, not only in terms of what's going on today in the news and so on, but also in terms of how that changes how we talk to each other in this very conversation. So we can look at the atmosphere partly in how we interact as much as the words we say, the way in which we say them.
We started talking about progress and I was talking about the technological advances and the technological companies. And I'm like, I do feel like I have a distinct way of looking at innovation and progress that is different than the tech companies and how they look at innovation and how they look at their progress. So maybe I would add that little distinct view on that. I feel like it's very
Okay.
Uranian.
What's the difference that makes the difference? In what way are you different understanding innovative technology compared to corporate norms?
Well, I think that innovation for me is not based on product. Innovation is it's a quality that you are in, the way that you are involving yourself in someone else's life. I think that there is innovation in this. It's in the creativity that is embedded in your questions, your quests, like I learned from you, the quest and the question. How innovative are you in creating deeper meaning for other people through the product? That's for me, that's progress, that's innovation, because you have you have a way we're talking about resourcefulness as well, but there is a breadth in the way that you either answer questions or asking yourself the questions that will not only serve your purposes if we're talking about corporation, but it will serve also the purposes of the customer, the other people who are benefiting or using or are part of the ecosystem.
Now, this ties into the reason why I associate the word Uranus with the word freedom, because
Mm,
technology that you're talking about, the innovative technology, it begins by hoping to make people enjoy greater freedom. That's the whole thing. That's why we are technologically progressing to give more and more freedom of people, to stop them having to work for as many hours in a horrible way. And that was the beginning of it all. And that's what Uranus is to me, is freedom. And there's one way technologically. The other way is freeing up their mind away from dogma and limiting beliefs towards something very much more liberating in the imagination.
yeah.
Talk to me about your take on Uranus. How do you see this over the 7 points of the Elven Star?
Well, it's so with the Sacred Seven Academy, we learned that Uranus is freedom seeking, freedom seeking expression. And for me, I guess it's seven aspects of that. Um, and the liberating pull of Uranus through seven lenses. I think I don't know, how would you see that? I feel like it's really connects to um because we talked about freedoms and liberations are not the same thing. I think we have different freedoms, and I do believe that, I guess, the aspect of Uranus in freedoms, it's the different lenses of freedoms that is availed to us
Yeah.
if we allow ourselves to.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Let's look at that. I mean, I think having that one word, freedom, is very liberating because you can just see how that expresses in seven different ways. On the physical plane, that's the first Elven Star point. You get sudden awareness that you aren't stuck, that you're not a prisoner of circumstances, and you get unique viewpoints. You can move into a different mindset, and that's the beginning. If you don't do that, then whatever you think is your prison. But if you free yourself from habituating a way of thinking, especially the slave mentality, especially the ancestral continuation, especially things that really limit your self-definition. If you can't move out of that, then you can't go anywhere. So that would be the first thing for me. And then hello is the next word. What do you do about that? You're moving away from the fixity with the Uranus blast of the freedom urge, and you're moving towards curiosity. So where do you go? I mean, when you go on holiday, you don't go to the typical holiday destinations with the beach and the hotel. You go to somewhere weird, and you join strange clubs, and you do bizarre things that your friends would never do. You explore in a very adventurous way on a whim. You feel this sense of like, oh, I'd like to do that, and you're already the travel agent booking your ticket before you've discussed it with anyone. That's the kind of Uranus approach to adventure. So I would think that would be the second point.
I think the third, yeah, in the heartfelt of freedom, extraordinary ways to show affection. Yeah, you know, I think that if I look at the first point and the last point, the first point has there is something that you said about unique viewpoint, and is when we start dissociating ourselves, right, from the societal mayhem of definition, and seeing how we have maybe an odd view of something that is different from the norm, but we can't really explain it yet. But we know that we have a distinct way of looking at something that has been indoctrinated, but now we see it differently, and it's the beginning, I guess, of freedom. And the last point is says about unique spiritual understanding. I like that we go from the first point of unique viewpoint to the last one, unique spiritual understanding. You see the whole process that we went from maybe having an opinion to actually having a whole spiritual understanding that leads to the psychological freedom that we are experiencing,
Yeah.
based on that. And I think, going back to your first question about how I see Uranus in this freedom aspects, has a lot to do with life teaches us moment. We gain opinions, we gain kind of like perspectives based on that. And then with maturity, we're starting to really see reality for what it is, which gives us the freedom to act, the freedom to author our lives differently. And I think Uranus is teaching us that we learn through our experiences. We starting to free ourselves from the wedding to the we free ourselves from being wedded by societal narrative, to the point of, at the end, 7 points, reaching an understanding of life that actually really free ourselves from the societal narrative, let's say.
I think I would see two parts of what you've just said. The first, freeing ourselves from societal narratives. So if we looked at point three, that would be probably to do with family relationships, the rather closing assumption that we need to go home for Christmas and play happy families, where really that's not the people that touch our heart anymore. In many cases, we're doing that out of duty rather than love. So freedom from that would be one operation of Uranus. Also, freedom to go and form connections, heart level connections with some rather unpredictable people.
Yeah.
You might leave the family Christmas and go and have a hippie weekend at some community. That would be expression of the third principle of Uranus. But I think we're moving away from society's expectation of us, and Uranus frees that. I think I'm kind of much more interested in what will happen when I express Uranus in a new way. So the Elven Star points opening up my mind to new possibilities of how to be free. Freedom from is one thing, freedom to is quite another thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to look at some of the Sabian symbols? Because they're
Okay.
Do they all tie up with your own Elven Sun?
Well,
most of them.
well, from what you just said, I have most of them.
Yeah.
Not everyone. Yeah.
What that means is that Uranus is in transit to your Sun by septile very closely. That's what it means. And of course, we never study that because it's so obscure and it's so fast moving that it would only last so accurately for maybe a week or so. But nevertheless, now it's very accurately transiting indeed. So you really ought to be feeling this or noticing it in your current circumstances, or mind wanderings or something must be going on if we're to understand this deeply.
Yeah. So let's start our Elven Star, the Uranus exploration here.
Well, Gemini 2 is the first point. So
Yeah.
Uranus is in the second degree of Gemini at 106. And this is Santa Claus filling stockings furtively. And the meaning is to do with spiritual blessings. Our barely perceived touch with the unconscious side of self is matched by the other superconscious side of self, which is accessed by faith, purity, and an innocent heart, one that still believes in a benign and generous father figure, such as Santa Claus. As long as we do not look too closely or with any cynicism, the spiritual realms offer comfort and blessings without explanations. So that's to do with the belief in the universality of abundance. And I've been thinking differently about abundance lately. The normal sense of abundance is measured in money and things and food and that kind of thing. But there are different forms of abundance, such as abundant opportunity, abundant support, abundant time. There's lots of different ways for us to feel abundance. And I think its central message is to do with the ability freely to do whatever it is you want to do right now, whether that's afforded by time or money or a helping hand from someone, but that freedom to do exactly what you feel excited about right now. That's how I would like to see this abundance described, which is a spiritual blessing. That's the same alignment, isn't it? Do you feel?
Is that Yeah, I think the um, the point mentioned in the spiritual realms offers comfort and blessings without explanation. And we look at life in the collective field, and we see how people can really be upholding comfort in the physical sense. And then you talked about the different things that abundance in the way of money, luxury things is can put people into a chokehold, let's say, because they live in a certain level of comfort that is not necessarily spiritually inclined. It's not from the spiritual realm. It's actually very much embedded in the physical realm. And I think it's very interesting that it is in the first point of Uranus, that it shows that how can we see comfort in the spiritual realm so that we start the process of divesting, or not necessarily divesting completely, but see comfort differently. See comfort in like the Santa Claus filling stocking furtively, the spiritual blessings. And it's gonna be some work. It requires some work to reorient ourselves from from a way of looking at comfort from and seeing comfort in a different way. Because I do believe that if we are all collectively, also personally, um go towards comfort and a definition, a relationship with comfort that is more rooted in in the spiritual realm, it will do differently in how we are building community, how we are
Yeah, I think that
building coalition. Yeah.
we need to change that word comfort to abundance and understand abundance as freedom to do whatever you want right now. So rather than comfort, which I agree is how most people appreciate
Yeah.
abundance, it needs to be understood that sometimes abundance is not comfortable, it's
Mhm.
opportune. And you just have to be excited about the opportunity that you've got to be uncomfortable as you have an exciting adventure. Most adventures aren't comfortable, are they? To be honest.
Right. And that's a lot to do with that too. Is like even when we look at what makes us the comfort aspect, there's almost like comfortability aspects. And I think that looking at it's very revolutionary to look at comfort in even discomfort. What is like you just said, how abundance sometimes is can be can feel uncomfortable, and yet how can you find comfort in that? I don't
Well,
know. There's something
I think
something
it's the certainty that after this discomfort, which is the adventure, you
comfort is.
you can return to comfort. I think that's the answer to that point.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Um, Scorpio 6 is the second point. So the gold rush, longing for more, finding the appetite to experience more abundance and life adventures. That's interesting. That ties up sort of very nicely. The capacity
Right.
of Scorpio to intensify feelings at any cost can be expressed as a greed for wealth, as a means of becoming more closely involved with society, although it is not much the gold that is the issue as the intensity of involvement. That's something to note, I think. Equally, there is a noticeable acceleration of the pace of life as the seeker's avidity for experience grows with each new aspect of realization. And until that appetite is met, they can be quickly drawn into any promise of deeper involvement. So, what I notice here is that the gold rush attracted people who were very intense indeed. They wanted the gold, but only so they wanted to blow it on whatever gave them pleasure. Most of the guys that went gold mining, they spent all the money. They didn't go home with anything in their pocket. They wanted an experience. And I think a lot of people who go for money falsely actually want adventure, and they think the money will fund their adventure. But it's not wise. You need to affirm what you want, not the money to buy what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard recently, people think that sometimes it is misconstrued that money buys happiness. It actually, I heard that money is actually buying time. Time buys clarity, and clarity is what brings to happiness. And I heard it from a very nice commentator, social commentator, YouTuber. And I was like, oh, it's very an interesting take, um, to to look at how there is an opportunity. We were talking about opportunity, and there is an opportunity that the longing is actually the longing to be clear, and in that clarity, that longing to be clear gives you the freedom, um to do whatever you want to do, to live an adventurous life, or to 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 your happiness, really. So sometimes it is distorted, that sometimes people think that it is money that is buying happiness, but if we look closely, it is not. It really isn't money. Is what it time enables, um, which is what money gives you.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, and you do buy extra time with your money, then I can understand where you're coming from. My experience of people that are busy creating more and more financial
Yeah.
wealth is that they actually spend their time doing that.
Hmm.
So you need to be careful that you do buy extra time with your money for your argument to make sense.
Yeah.
What we're looking at the second Elven Star point of Uranus: bizarre
Hmm.
ideas, strange communications, shocking viewpoints, eccentric friends, social marginality. And of course, the gold rush people were the outsiders. And actually, even in society, the people that really address this question of seeking abundance, whether it's financial or in some other way, they always put themselves outside of the mainstream one way or another. They're either the leaders or the marginals or whatever. They are bizarre people, very strange.
Yeah.
So that checks out.
Yeah.
Now
It
the
says the possibility is made known by those who creatively reach out and make claims. What do you think about that?
well the there's definitely a quality associated with people that go for it, that they're used to making claims. That's how you go for it. You claim the right to be free from boredom and imprisonment of habit and so on. So you make a claim of selfhood in a way which takes you out of mainstream society. So yeah, sure. I think the whole idea of this being a gold rush is you need to look beyond the obvious kind of associations with gold, and
Yeah.
understand that gold is a symbol of abundance, and you don't access abundance without a claim. It doesn't come to you. Nothing that you want in life will come to you if you decide that you want it, because wanting is the absence of something. You claim it, then that's the presence of something. So I think making claims is how you demand abundance of the universe, and the universe just says, yeah, I am abundance personified. Whoever claims it can have it. But there aren't that many people making the claim. Plenty to go around. There's an infinite amount of stuff and time. Take what you want. It's an abundantly fruitful tree, the tree of space and time.
Okay.
So if we move on to the third point, we're up to your favorite Sabian symbol, I would guess. Aries 10, man teaching new forms for old symbols. That's your sun.
Right.
Do you want to talk about that for us?
Yeah. So from the Elven Star of Uranus is love of unusual things and people, quirky sense of beauty, appreciation for free expression, extraordinary ways to show affection. Through that lens, it's never looked at it from that lens either. So it's probably need a minute here. But I always think that the Aries 10, this degree, has a lot to do with honoring what came before in a way that really participate in the collective prospering of our future. And I think I take a lot of pride in understanding the love of the Asian wisdom, the indigenous wisdom. I feel like I even went into a field that celebrate and does justice to indigenous knowledge in a way that is not only relevant to our everyday, but really honor um, the life of others in our in this in these times. So I think that there is definitely something to know to the way that you are veneering, the way that you are talking about those who came before and the fight of those who came before and how you are practicing their how you are practicing their experiences, how you are practicing their lessons, really, what is the learned wisdom that they have fought for and understood in their times, and how you are daily practicing that, daily celebrating that, and not based on, it's not a performance. You're not performing. You're just not saying, for example, there is this revolutionary woman who died, Asata Shakur, who was a revolutionary and part of the Black Panther. She died recently, and she was a refugee. I mean, she participated in a lot of things, and in America, and then she had to exile in Cuba because of the oppressions and the time and everything that she's been through in America. I'm really paraphrasing really badly her experience, but at the end of the day, she exiled in Cuba, um, because of her revolutionary and her politic, really. And I looked online and I saw how people were talking about her story and everything. And one woman stood out and she was like, "People, you guys are talking about her death, but you are not exemplifying her politic in your daily thing. So it become performative in you saying, oh, RIP Asata Shakur, but you not embodying what she was embodying in her time on Earth. So that has there is no gravitas, let's just say, to whatever that you are saying, because you are not practicing her politic. So I think that in Aries 10, that was a long-winded way for me to say that in Aries 10, I'm really to show affection, to really show love in in the things that I know hold value, and the things that people have fought for, the internal truth, the learned wisdom of my ancestry or the people before. I know that it is based on practice. I need to embed that in my politic of living, how I live my life, my way of thinking, my way of feeling my way through things. That also needs to be part of the celebration, not just speak about it as, oh, this is something that has happened in the past. That's a great thing.
Is there anything happening right now? I mean, this is really now, it's immediate, isn't it? This moment you're going through this Uranus transit by septile to your sun. Is anything feeling any magical, mystical awareness developing within you?
I'm not sure if I can point to something right now, though. Maybe you have to tease it out of me. Um,
Yeah, I'm trying.
because I'm like, what really is happening? It sounds very um I don't know.
All right.
I don't know.
I mean, generally, your sense of beauty is quirky. That was one of the phrases, isn't it? I wondered if you had a little bit of a poem or an artwork going on in the background that you haven't spoken of.
No, I don't have an artistic expression. I just have, I mean, one thing that you know of with the writing that I do with my thesis, and I think that there is something very artistic actually that comes when you're able to see how all the puzzles are coming together to create a picture. I think I'm in that phase. I'm going into the phase right now. I'm looking at all the things that I have, almost like exercises that were connected, but I couldn't find the common thread. And now I'm finding to I'm seeing how all of the
That's
distinct
that's
framework is just creating the picture for me.
that speaks
So I
to
feel
the
like that's the phase.
connection of threads. That speaks to the third point of the Elven Star, doesn't it? That's what relationship is. That's what harmony is, when you can connect the threads of something that wasn't connected before. It's an entirely different way of seeing relationship, but it actually fulfills the criteria of the symbolism we're looking at.
Yeah, I think there is that. I think there is definitely an aspect of creating. I was creating different things that I knew were going to connect, but I couldn't see it. And now it's been a long time coming. But now I feel like I'm getting those answers. It's getting more clear in, okay, this is how everything is coming together. And I can write it down now. I can write the common thread. Oh, this is how the all the distinct framework, this is what I'm creating, this is how they fit into the picture. So I
Well,
think this is what is happening right now.
yeah, I think we have to be very subtle and willing to give meaning to these Sabian symbols. Like, we're looking at it in such subtle detail that it has to be a subtle message that we haven't understood before. It can't be obvious, or we would know
Right.
already. It has to be
Yeah.
subject to a certain amount of willingness to believe.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
All right. The fourth point we've been talking about a lot recently is the Virgo 14 degree, the family tree.
Mm,
So Uranus at the fourth point: sudden rash decisions, breaking free, refusal to comply, groundbreaking discoveries and inventions, dropping out. And Virgo 14, the family tree. So it's just about ancestry, ancestral roots. There is great responsibility attached to the power of faith and charisma. It is inevitable that one with these abilities will be influential and guide those without them into the seeding of what is to come. As leaders, we need to be faithful to the collective needs of those we lead, with whom on some level we share common roots, which roots are the very authority for our leadership and the source of our strength. So this is about understanding how ancestral qualities have left their mark. That commentary was about the ancestry of astrology and esotericism and so on. It doesn't have to be your grandfather. It could be something
yeah.
as subtle as your cultural background.
Yeah.
And so for us who study this stuff, it's quite a lot to do with the development and history of astrology and tarot and secrets, you know. Um, and it's saying, yeah, we need to be aware of where we're coming from in
Yeah.
order to graft on our new ideas or Uranus flashes of inspiration to an
Yeah.
established, believable foundation.
Yeah.
I know that's a big challenge for me because astrology's kind of lost its direction.
Hmm.
Its very popularity, which has boosted its
Yeah.
impact, has actually diluted its profundity for a certain number of people. And so any new ideas are quite difficult to actually make popular because the popular people they haven't really got the interest in the depth of it, which most astrologers did have when I was studying it decades and decades ago.
Yeah.
What is the
There is this
on the
there is this thing of refuse, like, so the refusal to comply. When you are rooted in um the learning of the learning of your ancestry, or whatever that it is, your family, the expectation, and anything that is related to um your past. When you are rooted in actually the competency that you gain from studying the past, examining what has happened, or even his history, there is not, you have less inclined to comply to whatever that is happening, because there is this saying, um history doesn't repeat itself, that is rhyme. I see it all the time in the collective field. Those who are rooted in is um history and the learning of history, they are fond of what has happened before, and they can learn from what has happened before. Those are the revolutionary of our time, because of everything. They're not, they see what has happened and they move accordingly. They move in with deep knowledge of the things that has happened. So I love that it is Virgo 14 that is kind of reminded us, for me, it reminded us of how there is a refusal to comply when you are historically learned, or there is this learning from the ancestry and this flow, and I feel like there is that. And then there's the second part of this, which is the groundbreaking discoveries and the invention. And now I'm actually really getting into this realization that you cannot really have grounded discoveries and groundbreaking discoveries and invention if you have not learned from what has happened before, if you have not learned from the cultural mishaps, or the cultural the woes of what has happened before as well. You cannot really create something that you consider new, or consider groundbreaking, or breaking new ground, if you have not learned from that.
it's
And
interesting. Yeah,
sometimes people try to erase the past.
what's coming to my mind is that if somebody who has gravitas, it inevitably comes from their ability to honor the past. So, such great names as Einstein and Wittenberg and Wittgenstein and so on. These guys are very rooted in the past, and Freud
Yeah.
and Jung, for example, but they are the ones that bring in new ideas, and we will accept their ideas. Dane Rudhyar is another guy, you know, we'll accept their new ideas because they've got the gravitas of being those who honor the past. All right, we move on to the fifth point, which is Aquarius 19. So the fifth point of Uranus, utopian vision, eccentric ideals, odd spirituality, sacredness of freedom. And 19 Aquarius is a forest fire quenched, dealing with emergencies is the strap line. It is often expedient to keep secret what we do and what we think, because the power of governments and social pressure encroach upon our individual freedom of expression. Punishment, albeit mild when compared to being burned at the stake, is not uncommon even today when certain esoteric practices are exposed. Yet a truly successful life is lived openly because we come to find our place where to be safe and fully self-expressive. So an explanation: coping with intense problems cultivates individual gravitas and teamwork. So again, we were talking about gravitas a moment ago, and
Right.
we learn to develop this quality of the mature elder, the one who can cope with life, whatever comes, deal with emergencies without losing their cool. These people have dealt with emergencies before, and they tend to be older. Not always, but that's a tendency. They certainly tend to be experienced. We wouldn't really grant anyone gravitas unless they've got the experience to back it up. And this is where we're going. This is the please energy of Uranus 5, utopian vision, eccentric ideals. That's where we're going. And it depends upon our ability to cope with emergencies. Now, that's interesting because we are in the middle of an emergency, the like of which I've never seen. And the spiritual path through this must surely be how to cope with what's going on. Because if we find our way through what's going on, we don't exist anymore. It's that big a deal. So the spiritual path must be the path of survival through these difficult times. They're one and the same thing. Material world and spiritual world in alignment. That's intuitively obvious, but has not really been brought to the attention of the general public, I don't think. And Uranus would want that. Like, yeah, come on, get real here. You got to deal with climate change or there ain't no future. And that must therefore be a spiritual imperative.
Yeah. And I'm reminded of the first point of abundance and the spiritual blessing here, because I do believe that those who are cultivating the spiritual blessing and cultivating this way of abundance, which correlates to resourcefulness, for me, creative, adaptive resourcefulness.
Yeah.
And I think that you can cope with emergency when you are able to, quote unquote, capitalize on the spiritual blessing. And I see it in our collective that people are always, when there is in a sense of moments of chaos and overwhelm, or they ask other people, well, what is the answer? What do we do? What needs to be done? And sometimes those who are trying to find communities and organizers, they're like, well, instead of really focusing on the external answer, try to figure out what is it that you need to cultivate in order to find the answer. The answer is not gonna always come from the outside. And they look at others who are dealing with emergency just by being resourceful. No one has the answers. So you looking for other people's answers, but even them, you ask them for the answer, but they don't know the answer. They also they also try to figure it out themselves, but they use other skills that they have. Yeah.
I think one of the primary skills is a skill of Uranus, and that is the ability to know something which you didn't even think about before that moment and act immediately. The skill of spontaneity.
Yeah.
And therefore the faith that your urges of excitement and enthusiasm and movement in a certain direction are a spiritual expression of freedom and wisdom simultaneously, even though it's never been thought before. I think that's a very high spiritual principle.
Yes. Yeah. And most of the time, I do believe that those people who are able to think on their feet so clearly, I mean, we talked about the crystallization of our attention. It takes the effort, it takes that focus, but also I do believe that it takes competence in intimacy. So they become intimate with the wisdom of others. They studied those who came before. It comes with education, and then with all of the things that they've learned, they're able to synthesize that and able to focus on what needs to be done now. It's a moment by moment, and they respond that way. They have a way of responding, so they just have able to expand the way of responding to situation, whatever challenges that they're being faced, and they answer that. And I feel like it's within the capacities of a lot of people. You just need to cultivate that ability, I guess, those abilities.
I think it depends largely on faith. To trust your
And-
spontaneous urges is quite
Right. Yeah.
by society. Somebody who's just a free thinker, they're tutted quite a lot. No, you shouldn't be so free, and that's because everybody else wants to have that freedom and don't have the courage or faith to claim it.
Yeah.
There's certain thinking that goes along with Uranus that's after the action. So Uranus comes upon you, you notice it by movement, and then you think about what's going on. That certainly happened to me with the delivery of some of the information that we're studying. That just came down. I wrote it down, and then I started to study it afterwards. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
the download of Uranus is just beyond us. We can't slow it down by understanding it. So
Yeah.
understanding isn't necessarily a good thing. At certain times it is, but not at these times.
Right. It's very interesting to say, like, yeah, when you deal with emergency, sometimes it's not really about understanding, it's about really bringing it out.
Yeah, you train your body as much as you can, but when the emergency comes up, you got to trust your instincts or your.
Right. Trust and faith. Yeah.
All right. So Uranus, the sixth point, transcendental states of consciousness, social detachment, solitude, absolutely non-conformist behavior. So this is Cancer 23, the sixth point of Uranus, meeting of a literary society, which is to do with artistic influence, learning the hidden language of image and metaphor. There are categories of people whose function is to ponder in the more subtle aspects of society, the artistic, poetic, musical, and sensitive types. These folk attempt to understand society's emotional framework and hidden atmosphere well enough to capture and express its essence. They work mostly through metaphor and imagery. This is written for you, isn't it? I mean, this could not be a more obvious definition of where you're placing your attention. You know, this ability to bring through some new way of seeing life non-verbally, you know, or at least non-rationally. Some of your poetry, of course, is words, but it's the imagery and the art. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Which symbol is that again?
23rd of Cancer, meeting of a literary
Right.
society. Is that one of yours in your Elven Star of the Sun?
No, I have the 22nd.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I think we talked about something that is not rational and something that is more so felt, right? The felt sense of things. We talked about how people need to next last week with Neptune, talk about how it is very important now to go beyond the rational way of proving something, or the rational way of 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 trying to rationalize your way through things, but now it needs to be more felt. And it's almost for me, and even with what we are talking about with Uranus and this exercise that we are doing with this exploration, it is about attuning to the moment. It's about the felt sense of things now. It's ability to give language to our to the sensing, to our atmosphere of being, to the energetic field, and less about the world of um just the language and the words, even though the words and the language is very important. But now we need to be able to read between the lines. And I think that what I'm working on is building something that allow people to be apt and very adept at reading between the lines, because now, like we mentioned, misinformation and disinformation is just the norm, and it's everywhere. And the ability to read between the lines, knowing the reality that people are living in, or the reality that people are, the world making that people are building, requires us to attune ourselves to more than just what they say.
I'm certainly feeling this very strongly at the moment. I'm writing, and I really want a topic that I can write about that's never been written about before. You know, I want to stretch up and see if I can write something down which is entirely new. You know, I've got that appetite. I don't say that it's possible or I'll do it, but I do say that I'm going to try, and I'm just yearning for the inspiration to just point me in that direction. And I think that's where I feel myself to be the highest version of myself is when I'm writing something that's not been thought of before. Very creative, kind of pioneering, leading edge of thought. You know, that's
Yeah.
the landscape I like to inhabit most of all in my life.
Yeah, and I think that we saying this, it's we have to also understand, we gotta realize that it is the 6 point. So it's a we're going into, for me, a mature expression of freedom. And it is because of this maturity in the way that we have free ourselves, that allow us to almost touching this potential of this reality, how we are moving toward, even while I'm able to write the things that I'm able to think about as this new wave that is beyond the conformity of what we are living, beyond the norms. It's because there is a psychological freedom that I cultivated, and that I maybe that I'm working towards, that allow us to think of those things beyond norms. And I think it's very interesting that in the mature expression of freedom, that's when you're able to think of those more transcendent ideas that we kind of like touching on here.
Yeah, that's lovely. It's lovely to remember the need for gravitas as a foundation for a permission almost. A person of gravitas has permission to go somewhere new because of
Mm,
their honoring of the ancestral wisdom.
yes.
All right, if the seventh point is studied, we have unfettered behavior, free spirit, outlandish style, uncensored spontaneity, unique spiritual understandings. And this is interestingly placed in the 27th degree of Sagittarius, the sculptor. Another one of your favorites, as I understand it, making one's mark, giving some physical form to our vision. We are inevitably part of a group. In fact, there are numerous groups that shape our identity to some extent, and yet we are also uniquely individual and have an irrefutable inner longing to give material form to what otherwise would remain undisclosed, unveiled, and constrained in the realm of personal imagination. Our life is an artwork. Our journey is the creative exploration of what we try to convey of our inner experience of being alive. We are all sculptors of a kind. Huh. So that couldn't be clearer. We're totally and utterly free right now to do something amazing that's going to last and pass the test of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want.
And I think it's because it has a lot to do, and we were talking about faith, the cultivation of faith that can only come from Virgo 14 and Aries 10. This aspect of honoring the honorable, understanding, having faith, reverence for the symbols, the Asians, the internal truth that comes out of the Asian knowledge, the indigenous knowledge when it comes to me, and the ecological knowledge and all of that, and the roots, the ancestral lines, and all of that. This understanding and standing under, we were talking about understanding. So standing under those things, and that's the juice, that's the fuel. And then we sculpt that we with the freedom that the learned wisdom. That's the reward of having studied the standing under those Asian wisdom. The reward of that is this ability to sculpt your perception. I mean, for me, it's that we are sculpting our perception of things, and the sculpting of your perception can only happen when you have cultivating psychological freedom and the faith and the trust and the Cancer 23, all of that. So I love that one. I mean, you cannot like Sculptor for me is just
Yeah.
it's,
I love the way you're pronouncing ancient as Asian.
oh,
It's so meaningful, that little slip of the tongue, or almost, because I think the wisdom of the East has been played with, tickled about, in the Western mind. But we really do need to know that the Taoism, don't push, don't pull. You've already set up your game before you incarnated. Just enjoy what you set up and flow along with it. Surf with the waves of the ups and downs. And the Western mind just doesn't get that. The Western mind really rewards intentionality and decision making and resistance and success and all of these things. So it couldn't be further away from what they claim to be, an embracing of Eastern knowledge. So I think the ancients had to flow. They had no choice. I mean, they were the ruling classes, which basically the
yeah,
kings, and courtiers and those. And then everyone else was poor and had to accept what nature gave them. There wasn't anything else going on. And so that didn't stop until relatively recently, only a couple
yeah,
of generations ago in certain countries, maybe less. We had to go with the flow. And then that's the Asian wisdom. And I think it's the ancient wisdom as well. We got to flow more. And then somehow within our ability to surf on the waves of change, we'll build something that lasts, even if it
yeah.
a grandchild or a wisdom passed down. I can remember words that my grandfather told me, words of wisdom as he was walking along the street. He'd say, James, you got to do this. And okay, I'll remember that, simple wisdoms. It's like that's a part of the sculpting of his lineage, isn't it? I'm what he sculpted with his words.
Yeah,
It's very subtle.
yeah.
All right. Any last thoughts? Piecing it all together.
Well, no, I think that this conversation is also part of this because I do believe that the interpersonal dynamics that we have, um, it does comes from the way that some of the indigenous people have been able to create relationship not only with nature but also their community. They've built they have been able to build community that lasts. When we look at the ecological world is building networks and community that last. You just have to look at nature and to see how sustainable that the networks are working together and building that. And I think that a lot of people are talking about how building community, when which is great, but understanding that it has been done before. It has been done before, not only if you look and study nature, and I'm biased because I have studied nature, so I'm biased in that, but there is some truth to that. even if it's indigenous knowledge, you understand that if you really want to befriend somebody or create a community with someone, that knowledge comes from before, and it's already out there. So you don't have to look far.
It's very interesting to notice exactly in this moment when you and I are conversing that we agree about most of the things we discuss, more or less. We'll disagree about the details, maybe, but much, much more agreement is found. And yet, if you trace your ancestry and even go back to the African roots of it all, and I trace mine back to the Vikings partly, and the Celts and the Druids, entirely different backgrounds, but we've actually come to the same point in our philosophy, and we're able to talk about it using technology. We've met using technology from those different backgrounds. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, and it speaks to that. I feel like it speaks to that, and I feel like there is a lesson in this, and I mean, I'm aware of this now. There's a lesson in it's freedom to create relationship. Whatever that we free ourselves for, it's to free to create relations.
It must
And
be.
I believe that we kind of being able in a journey, your journey, my journey, whatever journey, when we being able to free ourselves from, so that we can free ourselves to relate.
Yeah. All right. Good place to finish. Thanks,
Yes. Thanks.